He was wearing the party hat crooked. That's the detail I keep coming back to, even now, 4 months later. Not the moment my mother said what she said, though I will tell you about that, exactly as it happened, word for word. Not the cake that she put in the kitchen and did not bring back out. Not the presents I had brought in a bag that sat untouched by the front door. Not the specific organized choreography of adults who had arranged a room in a way that required pretending the arrangement was normal. The hat? Blue, with gold stars, the kind that comes in a pack of 12 from a party supply store. Nothing special. The elastic string worn and slightly loose. He had asked to put it on himself in the car, and I had let him. And he had put it on with the confidence of a 6-year-old who is proud of being able to do something independently. And the hat was crooked, and the elastic was pulling slightly at his left ear, and I had looked at him and thought, I'll fix it when we get inside. I did not fix it. I got distracted by the arrival, by the bag, by my mother meeting us at the door. The hat stayed crooked. Marcus wore it crooked for 3 hours. That crooked hat is what I see when I replay the afternoon. My son in a corner, in a crooked party hat that his mother forgot to straighten because she was busy trying to read the room. Because she was busy hoping the room would be what she kept hoping it would be. It was not what I had hoped. My son, Marcus, 6 years old, sitting in the corner of my mother's living room with a crooked party hat and a paper plate with 2 cookies on it. 2. Not the 5 his cousins had, a difference I had not noticed immediately, and then could not stop noticing. Watching his cousins tear through a pile of presents that had been arranged in the center of the room. None of those presents were his. The party was supposed to be for him. I had organized it 2 weeks earlier. My mother had offered to host. Her house was bigger, she had more space, it would be easier for everyone. I had said yes because I always said yes to the gestures that looked like inclusion, hoping that the gesture would become the reality if I accepted it enough times. I had asked what I should bring. She had said just the birthday boy will handle everything. I had made the cake anyway. Because you make your child a birthday cake. Because lemon with buttercream frosting was his current favorite. And I had been practicing the frosting technique, and because some things you do not outsource. My name is Renee Calloway. I'm 31 years old, and what I'm about to tell you is the story of a birthday party, and a sentence my mother said in front of her grandchildren, and the one thing I canceled the following week that made everything go dark. But before I tell you what I canceled, I need you to understand what that corner looked like. Because if you don't understand the corner, you won't understand the cancellation. And if you don't understand the cancellation, you won't understand why I have no regrets. Stay with me. Marcus sits the way he has always sat when he's trying to be small in a room. Knees together, hands in his lap back very straight. The stillness of a child who has learned that being unobtrusive is a form of protection. I don't know exactly when he learned this. I know I did not teach it to him. I know he did not arrive in the world knowing it. He arrived loud and curious and entirely unself-conscious, the way all children arrive, and something between then and 6 had installed in him this particular stillness. I know what installed it. I am being indirect because I am working up to being direct. His cousins, my sister Dana's 3 kids, ages 4, 7, and 9, were not still. They were doing what children do at birthday parties, which is to say they were loud and happy and completely unself-conscious, tearing wrapping paper with the focused delight of children who have never had a reason to be careful with things. They were in the center of the room. The presents were in the center of the room. The adults were arranged around the center of the room. Marcus was in the corner. I had arrived with him 40 minutes earlier, carrying his birthday cake. I had made it myself. Lemon with buttercream frosting, his current favorite, and a small bag of presents from me and from his school friends. My mother had taken the cake when I came in, said it looked lovely, and put it in the kitchen. She had not put it on the table. She had not mentioned it again. The presents I had brought in were still in the bag by the door. My sister Dana had arrived 20 minutes later with her 3 children and a stack of gifts that her children had immediately identified and become excited about, which is what children do. My mother had arranged the gifts on the coffee table with the efficiency of someone who had decided ahead of time exactly how the afternoon would be organized. I had watched this happen. I had watched Dana's kids' gifts arranged on the table and Marcus's birthday bag sit untouched by the door, and I had told myself, wait, see how this unfolds. Maybe I am reading this wrong. Maybe there is a plan I am not aware of. There was not a plan I was not aware of. What happened over the next 30 minutes was this. My sister's children opened every present on the table. While the adults watched and praised and photographed, Marcus sat in the corner with his crooked hat and his 2 cookies and watched. He did not cry. He did not complain. He sat with his back straight and his hands in his lap, and he watched his cousins have the birthday party that was supposed to be his. At one point, my 9-year-old niece looked at him across the room and said, with the guileless honesty of a child who has not yet learned to edit, "Marcus, why aren't you opening any presents?" My mother said, before I could speak, "Those aren't Marcus's presents, sweetheart. They're for you kids." And then, in the specific tone of a woman who has decided that clarity is more important than kindness, she said the sentence, "Marcus isn't really part of this family." Let me stop right there, because I want to be precise about what happened in my body when she said those words. Not the emotional response, the physical one. A specific sensation in my chest, like something had been struck and was ringing. Not pain exactly. The particular feeling of a truth you have suspected for a long time, being confirmed out loud by the person who was supposed to deny it. She said it the way you say something you believe. Not with hesitation, not looking away. She said it to my 9-year-old niece in a living room with 6 adults and 4 children, as an explanation, as though it were simply a fact that needed to be communicated. Marcus heard it. He was 6 years old and 4 feet away, and he heard every word and he did not react. He looked at his plate, the 2 cookies. The hat was still crooked. I did not react either, not immediately, not in the room. I have thought about this since. Whether I should have reacted in the room, whether my silence was a form of complicity, whether Marcus needed to see me respond in that moment rather than in the moment that came after. I have not resolved this. I do not think I will. What I did was look at Marcus. He was looking at his plate. I got up, crossed the room, and sat down beside him in the corner. I took the hat off and fixed the elastic and put it back on straight. He looked up at me, and I looked back at him, and I said quietly, just for him, "This is not right. I'm going to fix it." He said, "Okay, Mama." 2 words. Wow, I have thought about those 2 words many times since. The specific weight of the trust in them. Not blind trust, not the trust of a child who has not yet learned that trust can be misplaced, but the deliberate trust of a child who has been paying attention and has decided, based on the evidence available to him, that I am someone who means what I say. He had watched me cross the room and sit beside him. He had watched me fix the hat. He had watched me pick up the bag of presents and put them in front of him and say, "These are yours." He had evaluated all of this in whatever way 6-year-olds evaluate things, not as a process they narrate, just as a thing that happens. And he had concluded, "Okay, Mama, those 2 words were the reason I was going to make the 3 phone calls. Not anger, not pride. Those 2 words. He was trusting me to fix it. I was going to fix it." I got up. I went to the door. I picked up the bag of presents. I brought them to where Marcus was sitting and put them in front of him. "These are yours," I said. "Open them whenever you want." He opened them. Slowly, carefully, the way he opens things, examining each item before moving to the next, narrating quietly to himself. My mother stood at the edge of the room and watched this with an expression I have seen before and do not have a name for. The expression of someone watching a situation not go the way they planned and deciding whose fault that is. She decided, I think, that it was mine. We left an hour later. I packed up the remaining cake, the one she had put in the kitchen, the lemon cake I had made, and I put Marcus in the car, and I buckled his seatbelt, and I got in the driver's seat and I started the drive home. He fell asleep 20 minutes into the drive, the party hat still in his hand, slightly crumpled now. I drove the rest of the way in silence. I did not call my mother that night. I did not call my sister. I went home and put Marcus to bed and sat at my kitchen table, and I thought very precisely about what I was going to do. I want to tell you what came before, because the birthday party was not the beginning. It was the moment something that had been accumulating became impossible to continue accumulating. Marcus is my son. He is 6 years old, and he has his father's eyes. His father, who has not been in the picture since Marcus was 8 months old, and whose absence is something Marcus and I navigate together, carefully, the way you navigate something difficult, without letting it become the whole landscape. He is curious and deliberate and genuinely interested in how things work. He spent 40 minutes last month examining a hinge I replaced on the kitchen cabinet, asking questions about the mechanism, not ready to leave until he understood it. He is mine and he is himself. And he is one of the clearest proofs I have that I am capable of doing something well. He is also, in my mother's accounting, not the right kind of grandchild. I have understood this for a long time, not from a single moment, but from the accumulation of moments, the kind of thing that happens below the level of the arguable, that you observe and log and tell yourself you are reading incorrectly, because the alternative is too painful to accept. My sister Dana's children, 3, from a marriage my mother approved of, to a man my mother likes, in a life that resembles the one my mother imagined, received at every family occasion the full weight of my mother's attention. The questions about school, the remembered details, the photographs taken and framed and displayed. The grandchildren wall in the hallway of my mother's house had 14 photographs on it when I last counted. 3 were of Marcus. 11 were of Dana's children. I counted because I wanted to know if I was imagining it. I was not imagining it. I want to be clear about something before I go on. I am not someone who catastrophizes. I am not someone who keeps score for sport or who approaches family relationships as a competition for fairness. I had spent 6 years telling myself that my mother loved Marcus in her own way, that different grandparents show love differently, that what I was seeing was probably less intentional than it felt. I had been generous with the interpretations. I had chosen the charitable reading every time one was available. The wall with 14 photographs was the last charitable reading I could make. I had raised this with my mother once, the previous year, calmly, specifically. I had said, I noticed that Marcus is treated differently in this family. I had named specific examples. I had said, I need this to change. My mother had said, You're being oversensitive, Renee. Marcus is loved. I had said, being loved and being treated equally are different things. She had said, I don't know what you want me to do. I had said, I want you to treat him like your grandchild, which he is. The conversation had ended. Nothing had changed. Dana had called me a week later and said, Mom is really hurt. Renee, she doesn't mean any harm. You know how she is. I had said I knew how she was. I had said knowing how she was did not make it acceptable. Dana had said you've always been like this, making things difficult, and we had ended the call. Nothing changed. 6 months later, the birthday party. I spent the week after the birthday party being very clear with myself, not performing clarity, actually sitting with it, giving it real time, taking it seriously as a process rather than arriving at a conclusion and calling it clear-headed. I went to work. I came home. On Saturday, I helped Marcus with the Lego set he had gotten for his birthday. A bridge kit, which of course it was, because Marcus has loved bridges for 2 years, in the specific and serious way that children love things they are genuinely interested in, rather than things they have been told to love. The kit had very small pieces and a 20-page instruction booklet that he insisted on reading himself. He read it slowly. He asked me what certain words meant. He laid the pieces out by category before beginning assembly, which I had not suggested and which I recognized as something I do myself when I'm approaching a complicated task. I sat beside him on the floor and handed him pieces when he asked, and did not offer opinions on his approach. It took all of Saturday morning. The finished bridge bore a passing resemblance to the one on the instruction booklet, in the way that first attempts bear resemblance to the intended thing. You can see what it was trying to be, and the trying is visible in every piece. He held it up and looked at it for a long time. He said, "It's not perfect," I said. "It's your first bridge." He considered this. Then he said, "I'll make the next one better." He put it on his dresser. It is still there. I watched him put it there and I thought, this is who he is, precise and patient and self-correcting. He built a bridge at 6 years old and immediately began thinking about the next one. And he sat in a corner at his own birthday party and heard that he wasn't part of the family. I thought, what am I going to do about this? I thought about it for the whole week. Not reactively. I have learned over 6 years of parenting alone that the reactive response is almost never the right one. I sat with it in the mornings before Marcus woke up, and in the evenings after he went to bed, and on the drive to work, and I thought, what is actually within my power here? Not what I wish I could do, what I can actually do. The answer arrived by Tuesday. The thing about my mother was that she needed things from me. This is not unusual. Most parents need things from their adult children at some point. But my mother's needs were specific and had been specific for some time. 2 years prior, my father had passed away, and in the absence of his practical presence, certain things had fallen to me. The utilities account. He had always managed the bills, and when he died, my mother had needed someone to take it over, and I had. The pharmacy. His prescriptions had transitioned to hers, and I had been the one who managed the refill schedule, the insurance coordination, the occasional pickup when her car was in the shop, the internet and the television service, which were bundled under a plan I had researched and set up because the previous plan had been overcharging her and she had not known. I had been managing these things for 2 years without complaint, without much acknowledgement, without being asked if I had the bandwidth, because that is what you do for a parent, and because I had not yet arrived at the place I arrived at on the night after the birthday party, sitting at my kitchen table in the specific silence of a woman who has been told her son is not part of the family. I arrived at that place. I thought about what I could do, not what would be proportionate. I was done with proportionate. What would be felt? What would produce in my mother's life a change in the quality of her days that might produce a change in her understanding? She had said, "Your son isn't part of this family." She had said it in front of him. The following Tuesday, I made 3 calls. The first call was to the utility company. My mother's account was in her name. I was an authorized manager. I called and removed myself as the authorized manager. Not the account. I was not going to sabotage her utilities. But my access to it, my management of it, my role as the person who handled the calls and the disputes and the payment scheduling. I removed myself politely, administratively, completely. The second call was to the pharmacy. I had been the coordinator for her prescription management, the calls when refills were due, the insurance prior authorization that came up every 6 months, the coordination between the 2 medications that couldn't be filled at the same place. Because of a formulary quirk I had navigated on her behalf, I called and removed myself from the account. I left a note with the pharmacist explaining that the account holder would be managing her own prescriptions going forward. I said this, calmly. The pharmacist said she understood. The third call was to the internet and television provider. This one I had thought about more carefully because it was the most significant in terms of day-to-day impact. My mother watched a great deal of television. It was, since my father's death, her primary evening company. I had set up the plan. I managed the account. I was the name on the service agreement because I had bundled it with my own account for the discount. I called. I removed the bundling. Her service reverted to a standalone plan, more expensive, less reliable, and no longer under my active management. She would receive a bill. The bill would be different from what she was used to. She would have to call about it herself. I made these 3 calls on a Tuesday afternoon while Marcus was at school. The whole thing took less than an hour. 3 phone calls, 3 polite conversations with customer service representatives who processed my requests without knowing what had preceded them. Administrative, clean, completely within my rights. Then I picked him up from school. He came out of the building doing the walk he does when something interesting happened. Half run, deliberate slowing down, the energy of wanting to tell something. He said a kid in his class had found a fossil. Not a real fossil, probably. His teacher had said it was most likely a rock that looked like a bone, but they had looked at it with a magnifying glass and made a chart of what it could be and what it probably was, and Marcus had come home with an opinion about each possibility. He talked about the fossil all the way to the park. At the park, he found an ant colony near the base of a large tree and crouched in front of it for 45 minutes. He did not try to disturb it. He watched. He asked me questions, and I answered the ones I knew and said, I don't know for the ones I didn't. He accepted the I don't knows without frustration. He has an unusual relationship with not knowing, treating it as a place to start rather than a failure. I sat on the bench and watched him crouch there, and I thought, this child is extraordinary. And he sat in a corner at his birthday party in a crooked hat and heard that he wasn't part of this family. And I am his mother. And I had made 3 phone calls this afternoon. And I was done. I need to stop here before I tell you what happened when those 3 calls landed, because I want you to understand something about what I was not doing. I was not trying to punish my mother. I was not trying to make her suffer. I was not performing strength for an audience or building toward a confrontation or engineering a dramatic moment. I was 31 years old, and I had a 6-year-old who had sat in a corner at his own birthday party and heard the sentence that I will hear for the rest of my life, and I was his mother. And I was the only person in that room who was going to do anything about it. What I was doing was removing myself from the positions I had placed myself in: the utility management, the pharmacy coordination, the service plan, because continuing to hold those positions while my son was treated the way he was treated was not something I was willing to do anymore. Those positions had value. They were worth something to my mother. And I had given them freely, without condition, for 2 years. I was attaching a condition, not explicitly, not with a speech, with action. Drop a comment if you've ever had to do something like this. Remove yourself from a situation to make a point that words couldn't make. Drop it below. I want to know. Subscribe if you haven't, because what happened when my mother tried to access those accounts is what changed everything. My mother called on Thursday. She called about the utility account first. She had tried to access it online and found she no longer had a secondary manager and didn't know how to navigate it herself. I said, I'm not managing that anymore. She said, what do you mean? I said, I mean, I'm not managing it anymore. She said, why? I said, I'm taking a step back from some things. She said, I don't understand. I said, I know. She called about the pharmacy on Friday. There had been a prior authorization issue with one of her prescriptions, the semi-annual one, the one I had flagged in my calendar and handled for 2 years. And the pharmacy had called her directly, and she had not known what to say. I said, you'll need to call the insurance company. She said, I don't know how to do that. I said, I can explain how, but I can't do it for you right now. She said, Renee, what is going on? I said, I need some time to think about how involved I want to be in things. She was quiet. I said, Mom, you said something at Marcus's birthday party that I cannot move past without addressing it. Silence. You told your grandchildren that Marcus isn't part of this family. In front of him. At his birthday party, where he sat in a corner and watched your other grandchildren open presents. More silence. I've raised concerns about how he's treated before. Nothing changed, so I'm changing what I can change. She said, I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I said, how did you mean it? She did not answer that question. She said, your sister's children have always been. It's different, Renee. You know it's different. Different how? Another pause. Longer. Dana's family is. They're together. They're a unit. Marcus's situation. Marcus's situation, I said, is that he is 6 years old and he is your grandchild. And he sat in a corner at his own birthday party and heard you say he wasn't part of this family. She said, you're making this into something bigger than it is. I said, then explain to me what it is. She could not. I said, Mom, I love you. I want to have a relationship with you. But I need you to understand something. Marcus is the condition, not a negotiation point, not something to be worked around. He is the condition. If he is not welcome in this family, then I am not available to this family. She said, Renee, I'll talk to you when you're ready to have a different conversation. I said, I mean that. I'm not ending things. I'm pausing them until you're ready. I hung up. My mother called Dana that night. Dana called me the next morning. She said Mom is devastated. She said you've really hurt her. She said the pharmacy thing was cruel. I said, I removed myself from an account. That is not cruel. Telling a 6-year-old he isn't part of the family is cruel. Dana said, you know what I mean. I said, I know exactly what you mean, Dana. And I need you to understand that I am done moderating my response to cruelty in order to make the cruelty more comfortable for the people who committed it. She was quiet. I said, when Marcus is treated like your children are treated, consistently, as a matter of course, not as a concession, I will be as available as I've always been. Until then, I need to protect him. And protecting him means not pretending that what happened at his birthday was acceptable. Dana said she needed time to think. I said, take all the time you need. That was 4 months ago. My mother has learned, slowly and with difficulty, to manage her own utilities account. She called the insurance company about the prescription. The television service is more expensive, and she has called me twice about it. Once to tell me she is upset about the cost. Once to ask if I could look into a better plan. To the second call I said, I can help you compare options when things between us are in a different place. She was not happy with this answer, but she heard it. She came to me 2 months after the birthday party. She called first, on a Sunday afternoon, which was specific, because Sunday afternoons had been when my father called, when there was something to be said. She asked if she could come by. Her voice had the quality of someone who has rehearsed a request and is still not sure it will be received. I said, yes. She arrived 20 minutes later. She had brought nothing. No cake, no flowers, no gesture that might look like deflection. She sat at my kitchen table. Marcus was at school. She looked older than she had at the birthday party, which was only weeks before, but which felt like a different era. She sat with her hands flat on the table, both of them, the way my father used to sit when he was preparing to say something serious, and I wondered if she knew she was doing it, or if it was the posture she had absorbed from 40 years of marriage. She looked at her hands. She said, what I said was wrong. I said nothing. I let the sentence be what it was, without rushing to meet it or fill the space around it. Marcus is my grandchild, she said. He is. What I said was wrong, and I should not have said it, and I know I cannot unsay it. I said, has the thinking produced anything besides knowing it was wrong? She looked up. Because knowing it was wrong is where you start, I said. I need to know where you're going from there. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said that she had been thinking about why she'd said it, that she had been thinking about the ways she had treated Marcus differently, not just at the birthday party, but over 6 years, and she named specific things, which I had not asked her to do, and which cost her something to name. The Christmas gift card, the photographs, the way she had asked about Dana's children, and not asked about Marcus with the same interest. She named them. She did not make excuses for them. She said, I did these things, and I am telling you, I see them. I said, That's more than I expected. She said, I know. I looked at her. My mother, 63 years old, sitting at my kitchen table, having named the specific ways she had failed her grandson. It is a hard thing to watch someone do and not be moved by it. I was moved. I was also not going to let being moved rush me past the part where I verified what came after the moving. I said, I'll ask Marcus if he wants to spend time with you. One-on-one, somewhere he chooses. And I'll see how it goes. She nodded. And I'll be watching, I said. Not as a threat, as a fact. Not waiting for you to slip, watching to see what changes. She said, I understand. I asked Marcus that evening. Because thinking about it is the beginning, I said. What I need to know is what comes after the thinking. She said she wanted to do better. She said she knew she had favorites and she was going to try to change that. She said she would like to see Marcus. She said she would like to take him somewhere, just him, something he chose. I said, I'll ask him. I asked him that evening. I said Grandma would like to spend some time with him and asked if there was anything he would like to do with her. He thought about it for a moment. He considered things before he answered, which is one of his qualities I love. And then he said, The Science Museum, can we go to the Science Museum? I called my mother and told her. She took him to the Science Museum on a Saturday. Just the two of them. He came home with a book about bridges, which she had bought him at the museum gift shop after he had spent 40 minutes at the model suspension bridge in the structural engineering exhibit, examining it from every angle, asking the museum guide questions until the guide ran out of answers and said, I'm not sure. Let's look it up. And they had looked it up together on the guide's phone. My mother told me this when she dropped him off. She was still a little amazed by it. The 40 minutes, the questions, the guide looking things up. She said, He's very focused when something interests him. I said, Yes, he is. She said, I didn't know that about him. I said, No. A pause. She accepted it. He talked about bridges for the rest of that week. At dinner, in the bath, in the car to school. He asked me questions I didn't know the answer to, and we looked them up together. He told me about the difference between suspension bridges and cable-stayed bridges with a seriousness that I did not moderate or rush, because there is nothing in the world I would rather do than listen to my son explain something he loves. He drew a bridge on Sunday, freehand, without reference, the way you draw something when you've been thinking about it long enough that you can see it in your mind. He taped it to the wall next to the Lego bridge on his dresser. 2 bridges, one built, one drawn, both his. My mother asked at her next visit if she could see his room. I said I would ask him. He said yes. She stood in the doorway and looked at the bridges and the Lego set, and the collection of rocks on the windowsill and the library book about insects on the nightstand, and she said, very quietly, He's got a lot going on in here. I said, He always has. She nodded. She stood there for a moment longer. Then she said, I want to learn more of it. That is where we are. That was 2 months ago. My mother has come by 4 times since. She's learned his current interests. She asks about the Lego sets and the hinges and the ant colony and the bridges. She is learning him in the specific way that you learn a person when you decide they are worth learning. She is not there yet. Some days she still defaults to Dana's children in ways I notice and that Marcus probably notices too. I am watching. I am patient in the specific way of someone who has already shown what patience runs out of and who is not interested in reaching that point again. The utilities account is still in her own name. The pharmacy is managed by her. The television service is a standalone plan. These things have not changed because I did not make them conditional on an apology. I made them conditional on change. And change is not something that happens at once. But the Science Museum was something. The bridge book is something. The grandmother who is learning her grandson's specific, precise, bridge examining, hinge studying, ant colony observing mind. That is something. We are not where we need to be. We are further than we were. That is the honest version. There is one more thing I want to tell you. 3 weeks after the birthday party, I picked Marcus up from school, and he was quiet in the car. The particular quiet that means something happened. I asked what was wrong. He said nothing. I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Grandma said I'm not part of the family." At the party? He had been sitting with it for 3 weeks. I pulled the car over. I turned in my seat to look at him. He was looking at his hands, the same way he looks at things he's trying to understand. I said, "That was wrong. What Grandma said was wrong, and I told her so." He looked up. "You are part of our family," I said. "You are the most important part of our family. You are why there is a family to talk about." He thought about this for a moment. Then he said, "Is that why you fix things?" I said, "Yes." He nodded. He looked back at his hands. Then he looked up again. "Okay," he said. "Can we get a snack?" I laughed. The real kind. The kind that comes out of relief and love and the sheer specific impossibility of a 6-year-old who can hold the heaviest thing and then ask about a snack in the same breath. "Yes," I said. "We can get a snack." We got the snack. We drove home. He told me about the bridge he was going to build with the new Lego set. He is going to be fine. He is already fine. He just needed someone to stop making the people who hurt him comfortable and start making him safe instead. That's what I did. That's all I did. If you are raising a child who is being treated as less than by the people who should love them unconditionally, I want you to hear this. Your child is watching you. They are watching what you do when it happens. They are building, from your response, their understanding of whether they are worth protecting. You don't have to burn anything down. You don't have to make speeches or ultimatums that you can't follow through on. You just have to stop making the hurting comfortable. Remove the thing they depend on. Change what you manage. Take back what was yours to give. Make it clear, through action rather than argument, that your child is the condition. Not a negotiation, not a variable, not something that can be worked around. Everything else follows from that. Thank you for staying with me through this one. If this story is living somewhere close to your own, if you have a child who has sat in a corner at a party that was supposed to be for them, leave a comment. Tell me where you are in it. I read every one. See you in the next one.